Hello and welcome to this week's installment of Developer Skill Sprints, focusing on modernizing your VCL applications with RAD Studio XE7. My name is Brian Alexakis and I am a Product Marketing Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. Today we will be focusing on web services integration with REST client and more. The more being the REST debugger, XML SOAP web services, Cloud API for Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, and we will briefly touch on REST client architecture for BAS, Convey, Parse, and EMS. I'm going to show a demo that will feature the REST debugger and the Twitter API, including Oauth integration. We are now on the 7th week of this ongoing skill sprint series. Last week we covered building scalable, multi-tier solutions with EMS and DataSnap. Next week we will cover how to extend your VCL apps to mobile, gadgets, and wearables. If you have missed any of the skill sprints from either this series or previous skill sprint series, you can always find links to the replays at embarcadero.com/landing-pages/skill-sprints. In addition to finding the replays on YouTube, you can also find all of the links, videos, project files, and related question and answer follow-up information on my blog at embt.co/blog-com-brian. And again, you can also find all of the skill sprint replays at embt.co/skill-sprint-YouTube. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It relies on a client-server architecture for designing network applications using the HTTP protocol to make calls between the machines. Conforming to REST constraints is referred to as being RESTful. A RESTful web service is implemented using HTTP and the principles of REST. The REST protocol assumes that the server is able to serve 4 types of requests: GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. These operations represent retrieve, update, insert, and deletion of data operations. These operations are assimilated with the server methods through a mapping protocol. REST assumes that each server method can be invoked as one of the operations above through a dispatch mechanism that assumes mapping between the URI, path, resource, and parameters. The interface between servers and clients simplifies the architecture, which enables each part to evolve independently. REST is resource-based. A resource is a source of information that can be addressed using a URI. The server returns representations of that information to the client, whether it be HTML, XML, or JSON. The resources can be manipulated through representations, modifying or deleting the resource on the server. The REST client components support basic authentication, Oauth 1 and Oauth 2 authentication. The REST client components supports a comprehensive HTTP client. It enables asynchronous execution, can support a proxy connection, and also supports HTTPS. The REST client component also handles JSON, providing you an easy-to-use way to parse and format JSON data and convert it from a JSON object to a T object and from a T object back to a JSON object. You can rapidly prototype your application's RESTful calls by using live bindings and design time execution. If you'd like to get more of an overview about the REST client components, you can visit the doc wiki article at embt.co/rest-overview. Next up, I will show a demo that demonstrates using the REST debugger to first consume the Twitter REST API web service, and then later we'll generate components for you that you can just paste directly into your application. The first step to creating a Twitter app is to navigate on your browser to apps.twitter.com. After you've created your application, you can begin to set it up. I've already created a temporary account for use with this skill sprint video. And here it is here. So let's go ahead and go into it. By default, Twitter restricts your access to a read-only. If we click into here, you can then update to read, write, and access direct messages. I'm going to show you how to use the REST debugger to communicate with the Twitter API. You can open the REST debugger by going to Tools, REST Debugger. Before you can use the Twitter REST API, your application must authenticate. Twitter uses Oauth 1.0 to authenticate. Let's go ahead and open the Authentication tab and set the method to Oauth. The client ID is found under the Consumer Key API. We can click into here and grab these values, which we'll just copy and paste over. Next, open up the Oauth Assistant. In order to complete the authentication process, we must acquire an access token secret, a request token, and a request token secret. At that point, we will be redirected to a Twitter website that will provide a unique PIN for our application, which we will insert into the auth code field. First, we grab the auth endpoint, which is the authorized URL. We'll copy that over. The access token URL is here. The request token URL is here. And that's all we need for the generation of our tokens. If we click Get Request Token, you can see here that our fields for request token and request token secret automatically get filled in, and it opens up the web page. If we click Authorize App, here we have our secret PIN, which we can copy into the auth code. Okay, now that we've punched in our secret code, we can do step 2, which is get access token. And if everything goes well, yes indeed, these values got filled in. We now have everything we need to begin calling against the Twitter API. I've been using this test account for a little while, and if I load up my Twitter account, let's see here, go to tweets. You can see here are a bunch of random tweets that I've sent out. So let's see if we can use the REST debugger to pull these tweets down from the Twitter API. So you can take a look at dev.twitter.com and navigate to the REST API, and in particular, let's see here, REST API, and in particular we want to look at grabbing information off of the user timeline. So this is going to be a get operation because we're retrieving the data, and the resource URL is here. So in order to use the REST debugger, we can just copy this, go over to the request, type this in to the URL, and send request. And if all went well, we should get back a rather large JSON blob containing all of the tweets, and that's what you're seeing here, that correlate to all of the tweets on my page. So we can use the REST debugger to Splunk through the JSON blob and target specific fields within it. So basically this return JSON blob is a giant array where each element within the array represents a tweet. So if I zero index and hit enter, we now are targeting the first tweet in the array. We can then target each parameter by typing in its name. So for example, if I wanted to get the text of the tweet, I would do .text, and there we get the actual text of the tweet itself, which correlates to this tweet right here. A really nice feature of the REST debugger is the ability to save your state. So if I click here and I go to save request, I can actually save this. So I'll say Twitter auth and get. And if I clear this out and do it, yeah, this is blank, so it's completely a blank state, and then I can load it back in. And here we go. We're back to where we left off. This is very useful for creating different sets of components that might be calling different REST APIs. Let's next take a look at how to post a tweet using the REST debugger. First thing that we need to do is change the method to post. And we're actually going to break down the URL parameter string a little bit by separating the resource out. And we want to just leave the base URL in the URL and then click over to the parameters tab and add here the resource. In this case, this resource is what we were using previously, which is getting all the tweets on the user timeline. If we tab over to the Twitter dev API documents, this page here is post status update. This is actually the REST API call that is used to post a tweet. So we can come down here and we can grab the resource parameter, which is this bit here, copy it, paste it in here. Next, we need to add a request parameter to hold the actual content of the post. So the parameter is status. So I'm going to hit add, get post, name, status, and then the value is the contents of the tweet. This is the contents of the tweet. Okay, if I hit apply, okay, so we still have our authentication going, and now we can just kind of look here and see that we should be ready to go. If I send the request, we've got the 200 OK back, which is good, the status of the return, and if we look at our page, let's see, where did it go? Here we go. If I refresh, you can see here that indeed it was successful in making the post. Okay, so now I'm going to save this state here. So we now have two different REST debugger saves that we can toggle between getting the tweets and posting the tweets. This is going to be useful for pasting directly into our application once we've sort of satisfied our exploration of how to use the REST API, whether it's Twitter or any other API for that matter. It makes it really easy to explore that functionality and then add it into your application. So let's do that next. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to use the copy and paste mechanism of the REST debugger to streamline REST API calls within an application. So I'm going to open up a new VCL Forms application, and we're going to save it off Twitter Basic. Okay, we're just going to put everything inside of a memo and just simply trace it out. I'm going to get more in depth later, but we're going to start simply. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to load up our saved GET request, and we might as well just execute it to make sure it's working. Yeah, and here it is. You can see all the data being returned. So I'm just going to hit copy components. Here we have a pop-up menu telling us that it was successful. Now here are the actual REST components themselves that are getting created: the client, the request, the response, and the authentication. Okay, so now that it's in our clipboard, we can just paste it onto our form here, and we can actually test it out by going to the client, the request rather, execute it, and if everything goes well, we should get a 200 OK. Yep, here we go, 200 OK. So the next step is to actually attach this data into the memo. And we actually are not going to be using a memo, but rather a list box. We're going to pull down the tweets and put them into a list box. We're going to do it with no code. We're going to use nothing but the components. In order to do this, to fill this in design time, we're going to first create an FD mem table and a data set adapter. Select the dataset adapter and point the dataset to the FD mem table and the response, the REST response one. Next, open up the Live Bindings Designer, and we are going to use the Live Bindings Designer to propagate the list box with the return value from the Twitter API. We can already see it starting to happen here as the FDMem table contains all the different types of data returned by the Twitter REST API. So what we're going to want to do is drag sync into the asterisk and place the text parameter into text here. And after I do that, you can see that the list box here automatically gets propagated with all of my texts. And here they are here. So this is a really easy way to test REST API calls at design time. Let's get a little bit more complicated now, and I would like to demonstrate how to integrate some of these calls in code. So this is an application that I wrote in C++. I used the REST debugger to generate two sets of components, one to get tweets and another to send tweets. The memo box here allows the user to fill in the body of their tweet, and then they can send the tweet out by pressing the send tweet button. The tweet status is returned upon attempting to post the tweet, whether it's successful or not. And the tweet history will get filled into this memo box. This is not going to be using the Live Designer. It will instead be using code. Let's analyze how a tweet is sent out. If I click on the Send Tweet button and go into it, I have a little bit of logic here that basically locks down the button after you press it to ensure that the REST API doesn't get flooded with multiple requests. We want to, until we get a response, we don't want to allow another send. So the send tweet function essentially takes the request, clears out the parameters, and the parameters, if we look back at the REST debugger, these are the request parameters here. We can see status equals the contents of the tweet. So we clear out any existing parameters and we create a new one for status, and then the body of the tweet here, and then the kind of post, which is a PK getter post. And again, that correlates here to this item being get/post. And then finally, we actually execute the request to send our request over to the Twitter API. Once the Twitter API has processed the request, it will send a response. And that after there's an event handler here for the REST request after execute. First thing that happens is we reset the root element to the beginning of the JSON blob. And then we take a look at the JSON value that is contained by the REST response, and we're just going to temporarily create a handle for it within a variable here called JSON. We next need to analyze whether or not the tweet was successful. If we go back to the REST debugger, we can do that. I'm going to go ahead and load the post JSON object here, the state rather, and I'm just going to do a send request. As you can see, let's go ahead and clear this out. Okay, as you can see, the response was 403, 403 forbidden. This means that there was an error. The rule with Twitter is that you can never post a tweet that has the same text body as an existing tweet. So if there is an error, the root element will be found at errors. Okay, and then we can enter in the array and target the message directly. So by setting the root element as such, we get a direct handle to the text body of the error message. So if we translate that into code, first we check whether or not there's any JSON, and then we check the value against errors as the root element. If it is not null, then there is an error. So we change the root element to the errors 0 message, and then we have to repoint the JSON handle back to the REST response because the root element has changed. Now the JSON handle will directly point to that string value of the error message, And we just simply are adding that string to the caption here for whether or not the tweet was successful or not. Now that we've processed the error part, let's see if it's a successful tweet. If we go back to the REST debugger, open up the parameters, and and I select this and make it unique, putting some gibberish in there, send it out. Here we get a 200 OK, so that's good news. And let's clear out our root element again. So if we wanted to actually get at the timestamp, for example, we can scroll down and examine what kind of options we have. Oh, and here we see created at with a timestamp. So how do we get to this item? Well, we can kind of look at our code and see that it's created at. So if I open up here and I just go created at, it gives us back the time code. Now this is not within an array. If we actually go back and examine created at, we can see that it's a root parameter not held within any array. So we can just simply type in here created at and get back the timestamp. So back in the code, we're similarly checking whether the JSON get value is for created at. If it is not null, then that means that we have a successful post. We set the root element to created at. We repoint JSON again back to the REST response now that it has the new root element. And then we set the caption to tweet set, and then we affix the timestamp. And then lastly, we add the body of the tweet into the tweet history memo. And then lastly, we unlock the UI by allowing another tweet to be sent out. Let's next take a look at how this application pulls down the list of existing tweets. These get REST components here were copied and pasted in from the REST debugger. Let's go ahead and open that up. And if I load the get JSON and send it out, we get in response, again, the list of all of our tweets, and we can target them by saying 0.text. So this is our first one, and we can go number 1, 2, 3, 4, tweet 10, and so on. So we're basically indexing through the array. So the equivalent of that in code is here we basically we execute the REST request to get all the tweets. We get the create a handle here for the JSON value, pull down the tweet count, which represents the number of items in the returned JSON array, where each one represents a single tweet. We iterate through that and manually change the root element to be dynamic with respect to that iteration. And we want the name, or rather we want the text value of the returned string, and that's indicated by the .text parameter. Then we repoint the JSON handle back to JSON value again because the root element has changed, and then we just output the value to the memo. If we actually run this application, we can take a look at how it works. So here we are seeing all of the tweets get pulled down, and if I say hello skill sprint blah 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 this is actually one that I did earlier, so I have to make it unique. You can see here that we get the response back, and if I open up my list of tweets, you can see that it automatically shows up here at the top, and that's it. So starting tomorrow, Wednesday, December 17th, 2014, a special Object Pascal online training session is going to be held by Marco Cantu. This training session is valued at $500 and is free for registered XC7 customers and trial users. You must register your trial or product before the training. Please visit embt.co/marco-op-training. If you have missed any of the skill sprints and are looking for project files, notes, videos, etc., you can find them at my blog at embt.co/blog-com-brian. All of the skill sprints are available on replay at embt.co/vcl-skill-sprint-youtube. For a closer look at the REST client library, please visit the DocWiki article at embt.co/rest-overview. If you missed the link to Marco Cantu's Object Pascal training, you can find the registration page at embt.co/marco-op-training. If you want to catch any of the links, and I've actually added some more stuff that wasn't brought up in this skill sprint, visit this week's blog post at embt.co/vcl-skill-sprint-week-7. Thank you very much for attending this week. I will now turning it over to Q&A.
And Brian, this is David I here. That was just awesome. The showing people how to use the REST debugger, and with their code back and forth is, you can, I use the term spelunk, which is like for, caving, going down into caves, spelunking through all these REST APIs. Everyone is different. They have different authentication mechanisms, and being able to do that and then just copy and paste the components in, it's spectacular. The other thing I wanted to mention is that to everybody, the REST debugger source code is included in XE7. So if you want to build a Macintosh version, or if you want to build your own custom version, you can get the source code. It's right inside of the source area of all the source code. If you have a trial, then the source isn't included, of course. But you can take the source code and build your own version, and also it's another good example of using the REST components themselves, because the REST debugger is built using the REST components. So it's very cool. Let's see.
So I had a quick question here.
Yeah.
The demo was for your user, how to retrieve all the keys for a user using the REST app who isn't a dev. Well, so if what I think you're asking is, when you create a Twitter account, you have to actually create an application within your Twitter account that gets linked to your personal account. You actually have to register it with your phone number and so forth. So your user, of your application would probably end up using they would have to create their own application signature within the api.twitter.com portal. So I think that's what you're asking. In other words, yeah, it's up to the user. Yeah, if they're going to actually be able to post, then you're going to have to create input mechanisms that you can then dynamically attribute to your REST components within the application itself, rather than using the REST debugger. So you can set that at design time, at runtime. In other words. Okay. Thanks for the positive feedback. Also, whoa, that was weird. My computer's freaking out.
Macintosh.
Yeah. So next week we are going to be following up with more REST debugger stuff to show how to do some home automation devices. So thanks for the positive feedback, Andrew. We will definitely be giving you more next week. Okay, we had a question here. What can we expect for an OAuth server equivalent in the future? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't think we have any plans to do an OAuth server ourselves. The OAuth servers are all related to the different services and what they want to provide. Google, for example, uses OAuth 2. If you want to get to your Google Calendar, Google Glass, Gmail, all those different things. Unless Craig is asking about something related to authentication authorization in our own multi-tier technologies, where we already have role and group and user-based authentication, and are looking at other kinds of authentication tied into existing infrastructures like LDAP and so on. But if he's suggesting maybe a sample an example Oauth server that someone could use in their infrastructures, I'll pass that along to product management.
A couple other things I wanted to mention. There were some topics that I didn't have time to include in today's skill sprint, including some stuff about Amazon and Microsoft Azure API. I'm going to be adding information to that on my blog post, so be sure to follow up there later this week.
And then Yusuf is asking about bug fixes. We have update 1 for EXE7, so make sure you get involved in update 1. He's got project switching form views. Yeah, maybe you've got a very large project. One thing is to use some pre-built components and so on. So Yusuf, use the quality portal and report what's going on with your project system. Okay, and Brian, somebody asked earlier about all the different links. I put the Marco Cantu one because that's happening tomorrow. Do you have all these links in your current blog post?
Let's see. You know what? I'm not sure on top of my head, but I will. I have some, but not all. But I will certainly add more
Okay.
as soon as this is over. I'll take a couple minutes and make sure I get the Marco Cantu post, for example, in there.
So I put that link in there because that's the most timely one right now, since it's happening tomorrow, 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. Pacific time. So do the date and time math in your locale.
The link on the screen to Marco Cantu's training takes you directly to the registration page.
Yep. That's the second one. And then, well, those are the two, the training, the REST client library. Let's see, I can probably type in the other one without making too many typos while people are thinking about questions. This is very clear, Brian. And there's your community blog post where stuff appears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Brian, it was great. I love looking at. Brian's going to give you links. We covered the REST client library in CodeBridge 8 for both Object Pascal and C++. So, those are two really good sessions, depending on the programming language you like to use to refer to. It gives you a lot of detailed information as well about the REST debugger and the client library. So Brian will have those links, and I think he already mentioned that. Let's see. There's a question, are any plans to extend SOAP in the future? For example, WS Security. There's no current plans for extending SOAP, but I'll pass that along. I'll just report that request to product management. The world is moving. I know there's still SOAP, there's still multi-tier Corba, all sorts of things. The world has moved quite a bit to REST. Google probably was one of the first ones moving to REST, but everybody else, eBay, some still have SOAP XML support. But I will pass that along to product management to see if there's something we could do. Maybe it's through some examples or whatever, but we haven't spent any time other than a few bug fixes in our SOAP support. Okay, Brian, I think you did it, and
All right.
for everyone, we had this issue with the hardware, but I've alerted our IT group to fix it. The recording and presentations that Brian did are all wonderful, great quality audio. So don't worry about that for the replay.
Yeah, once it gets on YouTube, it'll sound great.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a comment in regards to using you can test data sets as part of the REST debugger, and there's a link here to a blog entry. So I would advise you guys, if you want to check that out, to do so.
Yeah, the key component which Brian used is the REST dataset adapter component. So the REST dataset adapter can work. Actually, it doesn't even have to work with a REST call. If you've got any JSON result, you might have gotten it through an indie HTTP component or some other mechanism. You can take JSON even from a file and you can pipe it through the REST dataset adapter, and it has the property where the JSON lives. Maybe it's coming from a response component, maybe it's coming from some other place, and then you point it at a data set. You used FDMEM table, could be anything that's could be an in-memory T dataset instance that you create. So really that REST dataset adapter, which the REST debugger also uses when you want to go and look at the data in a grid, for example, you can use that for all sorts of things, as long as, again, that component points to some T dataset class of some kind, which includes client dataset, FDMEM table, T dataset itself, custom dataset, and so on.
Thanks. We've also had a couple of comments about appreciating the pace of this week's webinar, and next week we are going to be covering some gadgets and wearable devices that will also be consuming REST API calls, so look forward to next week. We'll be doing more of the same. So we have kind of a long question here, so I'm going to pause for a moment so we can read it.
Oh, it's talking about session component or session tokens or tokens in general, how secure they are and so on. One of the reasons for having session tokens is that you can set timeout timers for sessions on the server side. And one of the things that you'll want to do in your code is, once you have a token, is to make sure that it's still authorized. And if it's not authorized, you should go and refetch a new token. So that is all more on the server side, how long a session token is active, and the server will just give you an error at some point in time when you try to make additional requests. It'll just say you're not authenticated, and you'll have to write some code to reauthorize, in a sense, to redo the authorization. The TMS Cloud Pack components that I did a video a while back that didn't make it in this one, but I think Brian has links to some of that information in his blog. You'll see code inside of the sample program for the TMS VCL Cloud Pack, the Google Calendar, where it'll check to see if you're authorized. If not, it'll make a call to reauthorize. So you'll have to write some code like that yourself. As far as the tokens passed forward and back, if you're doing an HTTP call, I don't know what to tell you. If you're doing an HTTPS, then that's encryption over the wire. So whatever you're passing back and forth, data, tokens, or whatever, should be just fine.
Quick question here. Is there an OAuth 2 bearer token example somewhere?
In the REST debugger itself, when you choose the authentication type, if you choose OAuth 2 or whatever, then you'll see the code, and you have the source code, as I mentioned. As far as, and also if you have professional through architect of exe7 or exe6, you have the source code to all of the REST client library components. So you can take a look at the REST client OAuth 2 authentication component source code and see what's happening under the covers.
And if you do actually create that blog post, shoot me an email and I can add it to the blog notes.
Well, the other one you might want to put in your blog notes, Brian, last November, the Delphi experts, Danny, Oauth, did a RAD in Action webinar, which was all about the client components. And one of the parts, I think it was Daniel Wolf, he did OAuth 2 with Facebook. It's about 2/3 of the way through that. So what you can do, Brian, is add to your blog post the RAD in Action, I think it was November Enterprise Enablement, and that was all about, a good part of it was about REST interface and REST operations, and Daniel Wolf did the logging into Facebook through OAuth 2.
Great. And lastly, we have another comment here from Stefan. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but if you copy the table from the table tab in the REST debugger, you can also copy and paste the data set components from the clipboard. So it's a nice little trick.
Excellent. Yep. Why don't you hit OK, and then people will see the answer, the original comment. I'm not sure what happens when.
Okay, we have another question here.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, we have used the REST client library for all of our REST applications and would like to continue to do so as they begin to work with EMS. Is there any inherent disadvantage in using these components rather than the more EMS-specific T-backend component library? Any functionality that we will be unable to take advantage of?
Well, I think the only difference is implied in the EMS server is groups and authentication, not only at the user level, but at group level. You'd have to, and that's sort of built in if you're using the authentication authorization. Jim Tierney did a session at Code Rage 9 all about that, so you can go and take a look at that. John Thomas showed in his EMS talk at Code Rage 9, he used the REST client library just to show a simple way to talk to EMS backends. Again, EMS is all through stateless REST. So he showed using the components. The only difference there is you'd have to write your own code to do the authentication authorization using the REST components, whereas if you use the EMS components and you're logged in and user, then all the authentication authorization is done for you under the covers. So with REST, you have to do the work. And I think JT did a couple reasons. It was the intro to EMS, and number two, you could be, for example, building other clients that want to talk to a REST server or an EMS stateless REST server. Maybe it's some JavaScript embedded into a web form of some kind, or maybe you're doing some PHP work or Python work or whatever. And again, REST is, very straightforward interface for doing things. And there are plenty of JSON parsing libraries, JavaScript code, and so on for doing things. So you can continue to use REST even if you're working with EMS, but you're going to have to do a little bit of the heavy lifting as it relates to authentication versus using the EMS components, both the endpoints on the server, and then the client access on the client side.
Great. Thanks, David. Well, that is the end of our questions for now. I'll leave it open for a few more moments. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to post them.
And Brian, you might put links to those Code Rage 9 sessions as it relates to EMS, because those fit into REST as well, even though it's using the EMS component.
Yeah, and there's probably some of those links might actually be on the previous week's blog posts when we talked about EMS.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure though, but we'll definitely add it to this week in addition to that.
Yeah.
If you want to go look for it now.
I mean, it's all REST, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's all REST.
Yeah. All right, so just really quick, I will remind everybody that next week we are going to be covering gadgets, wearables, and devices for your VCL applications, as well as extending your app to mobile. So I'm probably going to be doing some home automation stuff and some other fun things. So look forward to that.
He could easily do without anything special, but I think it'd be a great example to show what we need to do. I should refer you, Tim, also, if you haven't already watched it, to Jim Tierney's EMS authentication authorization Code Rage 9 session. Jim did it both in the Object Pascal track and the C++ track on Wednesday, October 29th. So you should take a look at that. But I'll go work with Tim and see what we might do with a REST client example talking to EMS. That's not the normal way. That's why we build in EMS provider, EMS client connectivity for you with components and samples. But I understand that some people might want to use REST and JSON to talk to an EMS server from maybe a very thin client or even from other programming languages. So making sure we understand the basic and advanced authentication from a client side to EMS will be a good thing. And Marco Cantu is here this week as well, product manager responsible for EMS. So we'll talk that over with him, not during his Object Pascal language sessions tomorrow online live, but while he's out here.
One other quick note, I've added a lot of information to this week's blog post, so I do recommend that you check that out for some additional information covering topics that I didn't have a chance to speak about. For example, the Azure and Amazon APIs.
Clive was asking about Facebook using the REST debugger. I'm going to refer you to the November RAD in Action webinar that the Delphi experts did. They helped work on the REST client library components. And in that RAD in Action, it's November. It's like something like integrating your enterprise. And Brian, you might want to add that to your blog post because it's another good REST and JSON. It was based on exe5, but the REST client library components, work the way they do. Daniel Wolf, somewhere along the way, about 2/3 along the way, he does REST client OAuth to Facebook. And he shows, I don't remember if he showed the REST debugger versus code, but again, whether you use the REST debugger or code, he may have used both. But Clive, take a look at that. It's the November RAD in Action. Just go to the RAD in Action landing page and go back to November. I think it was something like integrating your enterprise was, I think, the approximate title of the RAD in Action webinar from November. October was Kerry Jensen on data sets, but November was those guys. So, and they definitely showed a demo using OAuth 2 to get to Facebook.
Also, I think if memory serves, there's a bit in one of the doc wiki entry that talks about Facebook connection. I'll have to track that down, okay. But I think there is. I think I remember seeing that, but I'll have to.
So those are both great URLs, links to put into your blog on this skill sprint. It's the never-ending. Brian's been putting more stuff throughout the day into his blog posts. So I'll really go to his blog post for this skill sprint. Number 7, I think it is. And there's lots of links in there also to the Code Rage 9 EMS sessions and to other, I think it was Code Rage 8 REST client library sessions that Jim and Marco also did. So really good links to lots of information. Let's see. Ken is asking, is there any documentation to review prior to Marco's class tomorrow morning? Let's see. That's in, the first one's in 12 and a half hours at 6 a.m. and then the other one is at 2 p.m. I don't know if there's anything to review to get ready. You might want to watch Marco's Code Rage 9 session on the Object Pascal language. That's a very short one. I'd say if you got 12 and a half hours, read Marco Cantu's Object Pascal handbook, which is a free download for exe7 customers. But I think reading that one, 300 or 400 pages, unless you're a fast reader, I think the best way maybe just to watch the Code Rage 9 Marco Cantu Object Pascal language. It was on the first day of Code Rage 9, so that would be Tuesday, October 28th. Go to Code Rage 9 and look at the schedule, go down. I know Marco did the opening keynote and then did an Object Pascal language overview. So that might be a good one to watch before tomorrow morning or afternoon, depending on, I guess, Ken, if you're on this time slot, you're probably doing 2 p.m. a session. Okay. Okay, Tim, we'll take a look and see what we might do with a blog post for REST to authentication, and somebody earlier asked, how about building a sample authentication server, which could be done in a SAPI DLL or an executable that would run somewhere, and you'd send commands to it. It would return tokens and so on. So I think there's always more to do in skill sprints. We're meeting on Thursday to plan the Q1 RAD in action and skill sprints. So lots of good topics coming in, which is great.
Question is whether or not we're going to be live recording Marco's session. I think
Yes.
we are, right? Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna record it and get it to the marketing people, and they're gonna market it in some fashion. So I don't know how they've asked me to put it up into a sort of unlisted place, and then they're going to figure out how to get the information out to everybody. So yes, it's going to be recorded in case you can't make one of them. We're going to take the best of both of whatever Marco does. If he does it perfect at 6 a.m., then that'll be the one. If he does some additional stuff at 2, then I'll merge them all together. So Neville, I'm going to leave it to the marketing people how they're going to get the information out to everybody. It's based on everyone who's got XE7. So if you've got XE7, then you've registered, and the marketing people will probably send an email reminder, thank you for registering, or so you should register even if you don't show up, because they'll send thank yous for the on-demand replay of the Object Pascal training. How Marco and everybody will use it otherwise is to be seen, but we always record everything that we do live, and or if we pre-record parts of it in the live Q&A, we always make that available as well. So never fear, I'm going to have multiple computers recording everything just in case.
There's a request from Peter for, at some point, to perhaps show a demo that would show a progress bar with a parallel for loop. We'll definitely take that into consideration.
Oh, you did that. You did that with the
jump list.
The scroll bar moving back and forth on one of the parallel programming library skill sprint.
Yeah, but I think that was, I don't know if that was for a parallel for, though. I think that was just a task.
Running tasks?
Yeah.
It's really no different. I mean, in the sense that you just have a parallel thing running, whatever that parallel for or whatever, and then you just keep moving scroll bar or progress bar or whatever. But okay, another simple blog post. Great. Okay. Yeah, and then again, Tim was talking about he's working on a sort of authentication class component himself to talk to the backend service. So again, Tim, if you want to sort of remind me as well, send me an email, david@embarcadero.com. That's always good. But I got it, and I get it, and we'll figure out what we can do.
I'd like to take a moment to remind everybody that next week we will be covering extending your VCL application to mobile devices, wearables, and other kinds of gadgets. I think specifically we're going to be covering some home automation stuff that also uses a RESTful API. So we'll be continuing our use of the REST debugger for that demo.
Yeah, we got lots of toys here.
Yeah.
Of all kinds. And then Jim McKee's got some. I've got some. Lots of different things around in this whole internet device, gadgets, wearables. So lots of fun stuff, and more to come in 2015, where we're going to use the not only REST interfaces, Bluetooth LE and classic Bluetooth, and even Wi-Fi to talk to all these different devices, gadgets, wearables, Internet of Things. Yeah, much more to be done, and new devices and gadgets and wearables coming out all the time. Yeah, I think that's it. The other ones, if there were some that are sort of off topic, we'll just contact you on email. It's real easy and simple to do.
All right, thanks for joining us today. I will have the video on replay probably tomorrow. I have to cut the QA into the final render
So I would expect to have that up tomorrow. And I have got all the previous skill sprints up so that you can watch if you missed any. And again, my blog is at on the screen there, embt.co/blog-com-Brian.
Yeah, a couple more things going on. There's the Marco Cantu Object Pascal tomorrow, and then Jim McKeith, Al Manarino, and myself are going to live present the RAD Tour sessions we've been doing on VCL modernization and app tethering and Bluetooth with VCL and all of that. That is on Thursday at 9 a.m. and 12 noon. And you can go to my blog, community.embarcadero.com, and go to blogs David I with the details and the registration links. So if you want even more VCL modernization, if you want to recap it all in about an hour and a half live presentation with Jim McKeith, Al Manarino, and myself, we're doing those for people that maybe didn't come to one of our live events around the world. So we're doing those online on Thursday if you want to join us again at 9 a.m. Pacific time or 12 noon Pacific time on Thursday the 13th. So you can go and register. They're also on the community calendar on community.embarcadero.com. So lots of ways to make sure you get up to date. I don't think we'll have. We'll see if I have time to figure out a REST to EMS thing, but we'll get that done anyway.
One quick note before we let you guys go here is that I also have uploaded an Object Pascal version of the Twitter demo that I showed today, so you can find that at my blog as well.
Great, thanks, Brian. Yeah, good stuff. All of it really good. And then one more skill sprint, as Brian said, next Tuesday, and then it's holiday time.
Yep, that's the last one for this series.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think I'm going to shut it down for today. Thanks for coming out.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye.